Welcome to the class. This is the Monday class session for Waste 103. And we're going to focus for this video on Pedro Pieri's Puerto Rican Obituary. This is a very famous poem by one of the New Rican poets who became more prominent during the 60s and 70s in New York City. I'm going to start by sharing my screen with you. I would like to show you this, which you find on the page of Wikipedia. Here you see a picture of the poet. He was born in 1944 and died in 2004. So as I was saying, he was part of a somehow movement, New Rican, the New Rican poets who also met at this location in New York City that I visited a while ago with the Latin ensemble from Crane, the New Rican Poets Cafe. This would be a great location for you to visit when you are in New York City. They still hold public readings, music, I guess, performances. He must have been the most prominent among the New Rican poets. And something about his life that is important to mention is that he was born in Ponce on the island. And then he came to New York when he was 3 years old. So his education took place in New York City. Another important aspect that I would like to mention is that he was drafted into the army and sent to fight in the Vietnam War. As you probably recall, then for this war that took place at, back in the history of the States, it was a very lengthy war that took place for about 20 years. And as you can see, people were not necessarily choosing to go, as it was the case for Pedro Pietri. Youth were being drafted, right, mandated to go and fight in this war. In this case, we're talking about, of course, Puerto Ricans having to do so. So let me see if I have something else to say about Pedro Pieri. So the war of Vietnam was from 1955 till 1975, to give you some context. Also, Pedro Pieri, when he came back from the war, he joined the Young Lords. And we already read, right, one essay about the principles of it was like a little story about how they became organized and they decided to do the party, right? The Young Lords Party in New York City. This poem, the Puerto Rican Obituary, was published in 1973, but he was, of course, reading the poem. And in my view, this is a poem to be performed years back, right? By the end of the 60s. And so what is this poem about? It seems to be very repetitive, right? If you read even the beginning, you have this repetition of the pronoun. They worked, they were always on time, they were never late, they never spoke back when they were insulted, they worked, and so on and so forth. So it's a very simple approach to writing the lines, but at the same time, I think it's a very powerful approach, effective approach, in that the repetition, right, will lead us to feel the emotion that the poet is trying to convey. But why a Puerto Rican obituary, right? Well, the obituary is the text that one reads in a newspaper, and it describes that the person has passed away, and names of relatives, and maybe it gives you a little description of the person's life and so on and so forth. So who's dying? Well, in this case, obviously, is Puerto Ricans. I was wondering myself, when he writes about they, right? I think he has in mind uh, two generations of Puerto Ricans, most likely. The previous generation, that is to say, the generation of his parents, as well as his own generation. Okay, um, he insists that there is something wrong with this kind of assimilation. I think he would use the word assimilation into the fabric of American society. Okay, um, from the beginning, we have the routine people, a number of routines that Puerto Ricans were observing without complaining, right? Um, I also want to highlight the fact that from the beginning, we have a different way of proceeding according to Pedro Pietri, okay? That Puerto Ricans were not utilizing, if you will. They never spoke back when they were insulted. So if Puerto Ricans were mistreated, they could have, and that's the little point I wanted to make, right, from the beginning. They could have reacted in a different manner, but they didn't. So um, that made me also think about who is this poem for, okay? And I believe that this is a poem addressed to Puerto Ricans, primarily, okay? This is a message that I'm sending, Pedro Pietri says, to my fellow Puerto Ricans. Look at what's been happening with us, with our community, say here in New York City. And can we examine it and be truthful and honest about what we have been doing and explain ourselves a bit? Why have we behaving in this manner? The whole point for me is a sort of an accusation, right? Um, but what is he accusing his own fellow Puerto Ricans of doing? Of doing? Um, the list is lengthy, right? The list is lengthy. For example, on page 119, Juan died waiting for his number to hit. Miguel died waiting for the welfare check to come and go and come again. Milagros died waiting for her 10 children to grow up and work so she could quit working. So waiting for something, right? In each case, waiting for what? I think it's the poet is asking himself and asking Puerto Ricans to ask themselves, waiting for what? What are you waiting for, right? Um, and also, I thought that the names that he's mentioning, Juan, Miguel, Milagro, Olga, Manuel, right? And he keeps repeating names, specific names in Spanish, are very important because they don't, then we have, right, people, somehow faces, because names equal to me up to extent, right? Faces, not anonymity. So he needs these names, because if not, the poem would be too abstract. And he's coming up with these names precisely, right? Because we know these are typical names for people coming from the Latin American tradition, Puerto Rico, Spanish names, and so on and so forth, right? Um, he mentions at least one location that seems to have been important for the Puerto Rican community he's addressing. Same page 119, briefly, it's a long ride from Spanish Harlem to Long Island Cemetery, okay? So it's not all places in New York City. It is a specific places where the community has been or is at the time he's writing his poem. Um, now, as you can imagine, for the 60s, he's clearly identifying as well the challenges, okay? The external challenges. I see like internal challenges within the community and external challenges that he's identifying. One external challenge, page 120. It says, after he says, Milagro, Olga, Manuel, all died yesterday, today, and will die again tomorrow. His problem is not that Puerto Ricans are dying, right? It's how they are dying. That's what he wants to emphasize, right? How are my fellow Puerto Ricans and myself dying or going into death, right? Um, $30,000 home, the first speaks on the blog, proud to belong to a community of gringos who want them lynched. Notice how blatant the line is, okay? And when he says gringos here, um, I'm reading white, okay? So it's a very extreme situation um, in which he describes people who want Puerto Rican people decimated, persecuted, lynched, which is a big word, as you know, in the United States, given the situation with African Americans and slavery and Jim Crow, the Jim Crow period in the United States. So that, I would say, it's identifying an external, right, um, challenge, oppression coming from one side of the country, okay? Um, the the big one of the important words for me in the poem is the word dream. And this dream I associate throughout the poem with the American dream turned into an American nightmare, basically stated. On page 120, right, it says, these empty dreams from the make-believe bedrooms their parents left them are the after effects of television programs about the ideal white American family with Black maids and Latino janitors who are well trained to make everyone and their bill collectors laugh at them and the people they represent. So Pietri is reading the American dream actually as a stratified socially and economically dream and racially, okay? So here we have, our house put together, and it's clear that blacks go here, black folks, right? And Latino folks goes there. And we have ownership of the house. So he doesn't feel that the community and himself is welcome, has been welcomed. Actually, that one, Puerto Ricans have been racialized, and two, that Puerto Ricans have been like put in their place, quote unquote, socially and economically, and this division is clearly stark, okay, clear cut. You're here, you're over there, okay? No in-betweens. But if the American dream is so um, so clearly benefiting somebody and or benefiting a group, and then uh, exploding a second group. Okay, so we have first citizens, first class citizens, second, third class rate citizens. Okay, there's one more complication. The complication with the dream is that Puerto Ricans are bought into the dream in the way the dream has been shaped, okay, for some people only. And that's why I read on page 120, 121, when he says, Juan died dreaming about a new car. So this is the promise. Miguel died dreaming about new anti-poverty programs. So probably a person organizing the community, but still dreaming about, something to accomplish. So this is a beautiful moment for me in the poem. Milagros died dreaming about a trip to Puerto Rico. So humble needs, but basic needs that are not being fulfilled. Okay, I think he goes more to an extreme in the next pages. Let me see. Um, they were born dead and they died dead. Notice how extreme are the lines on page 121. They were born dead, they died dead. Which is in a way saying this should no longer happen. I'm here as a witness of the situation, he's saying to me, so that this doesn't happen again, okay? So it's not only painting a very dark landscape in American society, it's trying, he, in my view, is trying to acknowledge, right, that dark landscape he's referring to, so that he, or the community actually pushes it away, okay, and transform it into something else. Now, I see that somehow when he refers to these dreams Puerto Ricans have had, or this way of incorporating themselves into the American dream, the American nightmare he's describing, right? Highlight a sense of foolishness, okay? This is just foolishness for Pedro Pietri, just believing and trusting in this way of incorporating ourselves in the way they are dictating it to us, okay? For me, for example, page 121, 122, they present us with an interesting moment in the poem, in that in their desperation, okay, people will try to find any means of achieving something. And here what he presents us with is a seance. So Puerto Ricans trying to communicate with the afterlife, with relatives who have passed, right? So that they achieve, as he says, good news. Good news is guaranteed. Pietri is saying, rise table, death is not dumb and disabled. Those who love you want to know the correct number to play. Let them know this right away. Rise table, death is not dumb and disabled. Now that your problems are over and the world is off your shoulders, help those who you left behind, find financial peace of mind, rise table, and so on and so forth, okay? So 2 comments. One, as you can see, let's find a way, okay, to, to sustain ourselves. But for Pietri, this is nonsense. This is absurdity, okay? There is no way you will achieve anything by trying to communicate with the death in this manner, okay? And secondly, notice how he uses the rhyme and the musicality of this fragment, and how this may recall you rap, okay? And what is performing a poem all about. And if we understand rapping, right, as that rhythmic combination of words that are keeping a beat along with the musicality of the language and I guess the full energy of the content, right, of what the rapper is saying, then you have a very similar situation here, which maybe, I'm sure, predates rapping, okay, and rap, but it was in the air. That's what I'm trying to say, right? And notice how it was in the air, because this poem for me is not for reading. It's for reading, silently. It's for reading out loud. It's for, again, performing. It's like a monologue, okay? Um, let's see what else do we find. Um, on page 123, bottom of the page, Juan died hating Miguel because Miguel's used car was in better running condition than his used car. Miguel died hating Milagros because Milagros had a color television set and he could not afford one yet. Milagros died hating Olga because Olga made $5 more on the same job. So it's, everybody has bought into the life, right, of fighting each other, actually. And the community has been dividing itself because everybody is looking, for this narrow type of solution to the problems that can only be addressed by clarifying the situation, by identifying external and internal problems, challenges, and I would argue fighting for the rights of the community and for coming together as a community, right? As well, not trusting that these are the solutions that will get the community ahead in your city, okay? Um, there are a couple of references to language here as well, but I'm going to skip it. Um, I think the second part of the poem, the last part of the poem, is very telling in that he goes back to those moments in which he mentions actual solutions. In here, he will do so. So here we have the affirmation, right? Before we have the rant, the protest, the rebellion, the nastiness, the ugliness of the situation, nightmare, right? But in here, he tries to tell us and tell the Puerto Rican community, there are many, many, many things that we can do about this, okay? Let's take a look at that. Well, the first thing he mentions for me is beautiful, okay? That word on page 124. And here I need to show you, I think, the relevance of the word. So he's saying Puerto Rican people are beautiful, right? Well, this is part of the context in the 60s, because we need to remember that one major topic for the times was that African Americans actually started using that sentence, Black is beautiful. I found this article in the New York Times, and what you can see is the title, Uncovering the Soul of the Black is Beautiful movement. And there was an exhibit, that's what I see, by this African-American photographer, Kwame Brathwaite. And here you have one of the pictures of, in this case, is his wife, right? So this was used, right? Black is beautiful, as a way of claiming, right? Color, claiming facial features, bodily features, claiming beauty as part of my legacy, okay? Here is the photographer, Mr. Brathwaite in Harlem. And let me see if we find more pictures, right? So what the young lords and Pietri were doing actually is to, again, bring something back from this community, the African-American community, that was fighting also for perceptions, right? Perceptions on TV, perceptions on photography about what was the beauty, or let's say plainly, ugliness, okay, of the of people belonging in the African community. And he's doing the same for the Puerto Rican community with this statement, okay? Statement. So we're talking about stereotypes, but we also are talking about possible racist gazes, looking at, right? Looking at Puerto Ricans in this particular case. So he's gotta say, for that reason, Puerto Ricanos are a beautiful race. Then what is it that Puerto Ricans can do, right? Focus on page 125. If only they had turned off the television and tuned into their own imaginations. So there's a lot that can be done through envisioning a different way of living. But for that, you don't have to pay attention to the images that they are giving, producing, right? Marketing regarding your community, okay? Don't trust in them, because Puerto Ricans are beautiful people. He also mentions white supremacy Bibles. Disregard them, toss them away, he's saying, right? And make their Latino souls the only religion of the race. So By Latino souls, I guess he's talking also about heritage in my view, okay? And looking at ourselves in a different way through a different lens or a different gaze that is not the gaze of the racist, right? It's the gaze of appreciation and is the gaze of the future, right? It's not the gaze of the past or the present, by the way, right? Given what he's depicting, okay? Um, what else that may be significant? Um, Juan Miguel Milagros, Olga Manuel, finishing the poem, will right now be doing their own thing where beautiful people sing and dance and work together, where the wind is a stranger to miserable weather conditions, where you do not need the dictionary to communicate with your people. And here is one main point that he will make about language. Aquí, and then notice the repetition of aquí, which means here, of course, in Spanish, right? Aquí you salute your flag first, which I take is Puerto Rican flag. Aquí there are no dial soap commercials. Aquí everybody smells good. Aquí TV dinners do not have a future. Aquí the men and women admire desire and never get tired of each other. So let's build up a community, right, of equals. Let's not necessarily support external influences that are leading us to believe or trust in a society that will never accept us unless we accept ourselves first. And that may be the most powerful message of this obituary, right? It is us. Notice how he's saying, I'm talking to my people because it is us who need to take the first step. Don't expect that this will happen coming from somebody else. Unless we do it, nobody will do it. So we are beautiful people, right? We have Latino souls. We can embrace our music, our culture, our traditions, if you will. And most importantly, we can embrace Spanish according to him, okay? Let's use the Spanish language. Let's communicate in the Spanish language, which is quite interesting to me because notice that most of the poem, of course, 97% is in English. So it seems to be like a little contradiction here, right? If he's not writing the poem in Spanish and performing it also in Spanish. But then I would have to acknowledge his bilingual practices, okay? Here we have a person then who is bilingual, okay? And that would be part of the legacy as well, right? And notice how the legacy may be renewed in the sense that because he's part of those who grew up in New York City, who also fought in Vietnam. And I think the poem has a lot to do with the Vietnam War, okay? In the sense that I don't think that we would have this kind of poetry unless he was utterly dissatisfied with his experience during the Vietnam War years, okay? So that anger, right? The desperation, the disgust he feels about what is happening to the Puerto Rican community, it's embedded also in that specific historical situation for me, namely Vietnam War, okay? But also that triggers, the hope of a different community, okay, in New York City. Aquí que pasa power is happening, okay? So the greeting, right, in Spanish, what's up, que pasa? The cordial greeting among people will be part of our community, should be part of our community. And notice how he ends, and with this I finish. Aquí to be called negrito, page 126, means to be called love, which ties or connects, right, the African, the African, right, but also the Afro-Puerto Rican side of the story. He feels very much part of it, to love. to appreciation and to what I was precisely saying before. Black is beautiful, Puerto Rican is beautiful. The intersection, right, between those two for the Puerto Rican community. So I'm going to leave you, I hope, with a short video. I think I have it. Let me see. Yes, I do have it. It's short, but we see the poet himself reading the beginning or performing the beginning of his poem. And I think it's at the New Rican Poets Cafe. Here we go. I just need to find it here. It's a short video in black and white, 1968. And here we go.
They were always on time. They were never late. They never spoke back when they were insulted. They worked. They never went on strike without permission. They never took days off that were not on the calendar. They worked 10 days a week and were only paid for 5. They worked, they worked and they died. They died broke. They died owing. They died never knowing what the front entrance of the First National City Bank looks like. Juan, Miguel, Milagro, Olga, Manuel, all died yesterday, today, and will die again tomorrow, passing their bill collectors on to the next of kin. All die waiting for the Garden of Eden to open up again under a new management. All die dreaming about America, waking them up in the middle of the night screaming, Mira, mira, your name is on the winning lottery ticket for $100,000. All die hating the grocery stores that sold them make-believe steak and bulletproof rice and beans. All die dreaming, hating, and waiting. Dead Puerto Ricans who never knew they were Puerto Ricans, who never took a coffee break from the 10 Commandments to kill, kill, kill the landlords of their cracked skulls and communicate with their Latin souls. Juan, Miguel, Milagro, Olga, Manuel, from the nervous breakdown street where the mice live like millionaires and the people do not live at all. They are there.
I'm going to stop it there, okay? And so expect me to put also on the course page for this week a second video pertaining to the essay by Mijene Gonzalez Whippler. And the title is Yoruba from the Santeria Experience. So I'll put a second video for the Monday session. This is on page 256. Thanks.